After the disaster that was Valkyria Revolution, a lot of fans thought the Valkyria series was done for. Valkyria Revolution completely abandoned the series' strategy roots in favor of awkward action gameplay, and it was universally slammed by critics and fans alike. But thankfully, Sega decided to give the series one more chance with Valkyria Chronicles 4, and with it, we've seen a return to strategy gameplay. The results were very good, and while I do have a few issues with the game, I thoroughly enjoyed it overall. Their philosophy when making this game seemed to have been, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and it generally did work out. Valkyria Chronicles 4 takes us back to the Second Europan War, a devastating conflict that pits the Atlantic Federation against the Imperial Alliance. The Empire is slowly advancing in Federation territory, and in response, the Federation launches a last-ditch effort known as Operation Northern Cross, a full-on invasion of the Empire with the last of their resources. I must say that I was not fully satisfied with this setting. It is an acceptable choice, but it does have a been there, done that feel to it, due to it taking place at the same time as the original game and the Japan-only Valkyria Chronicles 3. Why not have a game that takes place during the First Europan War, or in some sort of future conflict? There's so many possible settings with the world of Valkyria Chronicles, and it does strike me as a bit lazy to pick the same war on the same continent for 3 out of the 4 mainline games. Thankfully, Sega does successfully craft a great story in Valkyria Chronicles 4, and that ultimately does supersede their questionable choice of setting. Throughout the game, you get to see the main theater of the war, and it's heartbreaking to see the destruction caused by a war of this scale. Operation Northern Cross had the most casualties of all fronts in the Second Europan War, and the plot does a great job of showing you the consequences of this sort of conflict. There's several heavy-hitting themes that are explored throughout the game. It pits democracy against imperialism and questions whether decentralized liberal democratic states can overcome imperialistic giants that are united in their undying loyalty to their emperor. It touches on camaraderie and what it means to go to war with your friends, to struggle through terrible conditions, and to make the ultimate sacrifice. And above all, Valkyria Chronicles 4 delves into the reality that a war is not always as simple as good versus evil. The game does a great job of surprising you. There's more than a few twists and turns, and you will certainly be entertained throughout the course of the plot. But I couldn't help but notice a huge missed opportunity with this game. Given that it takes place during the Second Europan War, you would think that the game would give updates on what is going on in the Gallian Front, the main setting of the original game. The biggest advantage of having 2 simultaneous plots is to show how they're connected together, and it would have been nice to see what Welkin and Alicia were doing during various moments of Valkyria Chronicles 4, allowing the player to revisit the original experience and to see the bigger picture of the Second Europan War. What makes this even worse is that the main cast of Valkyria Chronicles 4 is from Gallia, and therefore they have a direct interest in being up to date with the events of that front. I can't help but wonder why Sega decided not to show how the events play out simultaneously, and the only explanation that I can think of is that they wanted players to enjoy the plot without prior knowledge of the series. And to that I say, play the original game anyways, because it's really that good. Regardless, it was a huge mistake not to include the events of the original, and I would have loved to have seen the reactions of the Valkyria Chronicles 4 characters to the events of the Gallian Front, especially because the game had a fantastic cast. When you examine the characters of the original Valkyria Chronicles, the only ones that people really care about are Welkin, Alicia, and perhaps Izara. In contrast, Valkyria Chronicles 4 features 4 fully fleshed out characters in Claude, Kai, Raz, and Riley. The game does a great job of developing these characters and fleshing out their backstories. They interact with each other in hilarious ways, and you really start to understand how each of these 4 characters see each other throughout the game. For example, you get to see the bromance between Claude and Raz, or how Riley and Raz tease each other. Each of these 4 characters has something unique to offer, and the game is better because of it. But it doesn't just stop there. The supporting cast in this game is also very solid. Characters like Miles and Minerva are reasonably well developed and play a significant role during key moments. Moreover, the game features a new mode known as Squad Stories, where every single unit in the game gets a scene and a little bit of development. It shows how the units interact with each other during day-to-day activities of the squad, and it also has some bonus maps. It really helps putting a personality to generic units in combat and makes you care about them a little bit more. In the original game, you really didn't know much about your unit other than a few lines in the glossary, so Squad Stories was definitely a welcome addition to the game. The villains of Valkyria Chronicles 4 were also very well written. They are sympathetic characters, and there were definitely some moments in the game where I was questioning which side is truly in the right. And if a game can make you question that, it's certainly done its job when it comes to villains. Valkyria Chronicles 4 takes us back to the strategy hybrid roots of the series. Like previous entries, the gameplay involves fielding an army of units and pitting them against an enemy team. Each mission has a specific objective, which can be anything from capturing an enemy base to killing a specific enemy unit. Each turn, the player has a set amount of command points which they can use to control a unit, call for reinforcements, or issue an order that can improve your squad's effectiveness. If the player chooses to control a unit, they can navigate the map in real time with the unit's action points and attack the enemy. The amount of action points, the type of weapon, and overall stats are determined by the unit's class, which includes scouts, shock troopers, lancers, snipers, engineers, and the brand new grenadiers. Each of these classes have their own strengths and weaknesses and specific uses in combat, and of course, the main character commands an armored tank with a turret, a cannon, and a mortar. This was the basic gameplay system of the mainline series, and it's the battle system that makes Valkyria Chronicles awesome. It's an absolute blast strategizing your turn and using your unit's strength to your advantage. And this system remains more or less unchanged in Valkyria Chronicles 4, save for a few balancing tweaks and new mechanics. So if you like the gameplay of the previous games in the series, you'll feel right at home here. But if you're one of those weird people who didn't like the gameplay of previous iterations, Valkyria Chronicles 4 is probably not for you. So let's talk about the new additions. The big one for me was the Grenadier class, and it was a great addition overall. This new class launches grenades to very far distances, allowing you to hit enemies on higher elevations or even behind obstacles. With the support of an engineer to resupply ammo, Grenadiers can do some serious damage to the enemy team. They're also useful defensive units and will automatically launch an attack if the enemy comes within range. This applies to enemy units as well, thereby adding an extra element to think about when navigating your units. If you're within range of an enemy Grenadier, you need to strategically place your unit under a roof or ensure that you're able to take a hit. Therefore, the Grenadier class was very useful and definitely added to the strategic aspect of the game. However, Grenadiers are also able to hit tanks, and because of that, the already underwhelming Lancer class becomes even less useful. Between anti-tank orders, your own tanks, and Grenadiers, you have more than enough power to take out enemy tanks without Lancers. As I progressed throughout the game, I actually stopped fielding Lancers altogether and only called them in as reinforcements if I really needed them. Valkyria Chronicles 4 also brings back the direct command mechanic from the third game, and when used, a squad leader can pair up with 2 other units who will follow them for the rest of the turn. This mechanic was really fun to use, and it was particularly useful for transporting units with lower action points. I frequently use a scout squad leader to transport a sniper or a grenadier to a better tactical position, and to put the cherry on top, the units that are following you will provide support fire in what's called a co-op attack, so I would definitely recommend you explore this mechanic when playing. Now, just to wrap up some of the new gameplay mechanics, Valkyria Chronicles also adds a new tank called the Centurion. This is a tank that has some special abilities like mapping enemies and bombardment, and it is fairly useful throughout the game. There's also an ability called Last Stand, which if you've ever played a Call of Duty game, you'll already know what it is. When your unit is down, you have one final stand where you can either shoot a few more bullets or give a boost to one of your allies. This is a pretty dumb mechanic because you really don't want to be relying on death to accomplish your mission, but it did end up being useful to me in a few instances. Either way, the mechanic is relatively benign, and it certainly doesn't make the gameplay any worse. Overall, the battle system is a slight improvement over the original, which already was fantastic. Like I alluded to at the start of the video, Valkyria Chronicles 4 is above all a return to form for a series that was on the brink of dying. The plot takes us to the familiar yet interesting Second European War, and with a strong cast of characters, it succeeded in telling an exciting story. The gameplay is more or less unchanged from the original, with a few new mechanics and tweaks to keep it fresh. And just like the rest of the series, the music and art style of the game is absolutely gorgeous and definitely enhances the experience. Ultimately, I think that if you like the original game, you'll almost certainly like this one, but if you didn't, this iteration probably won't do much to change your mind. Personally, I love the original Valkyria Chronicles, and I thoroughly enjoyed playing another entry of the series. So my final score is an 8 out of 10. Valkyria Chronicles 4 is a great game all around with only a few minor issues. So thank you all for watching this video. I know that it's been a very long time since I uploaded. Unfortunately, life does get in the way at times, but I should be able to upload more regularly from here on out. So thanks again, and I hope you all have a great day.